Okay, my name is Bobby Vaught. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Let's examine Bernie Sanders one more time. If there's anybody in America who's more clueless on economics than Kamala Harris, it would have to be Bernie Sanders. I'm going to show you something here. I want to listen very closely to what he says here, okay? And just turn the camera around and start the video.
One example, maybe the most important. You have three Wall Street investment firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, that combined control, they don't own it, control over $20 trillion in assets.
Half of that is right. They're brokers. He's right. They don't own it. They don't own the assets. If you own shares of, pick something, anything, I'm not doing stock picks here, it's just an example. You own shares of Pepsi, let's say. Just pick one, anything. Not material to the point here what it is. You own shares of Pepsi. Vanguard, State Street, and what was the other one you mentioned? BlackRock. They're brokers. Brokers match buyers and sellers. They don't, that's where Bernie is wrong. That doesn't mean they control those assets. That's all brokers do. Your broker is Schwab, maybe, whoever it is, or one of those three that Bernie mentioned. They are holding those shares for you. Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock, or Schwab, or whoever your broker is, they don't have voting rights to the board for your shares of Pepsi, or whatever it is. Okay, let's just continue here. We're going to make some more comments on this.
Three companies.
Let's pause there for a second, because most people can't put their head around $20 trillion. That's a lot of money.
Yes, I think
we can establish that. In fact, that's actually
what investigative reporting is
all what it's all about.
Okay, so basically they're just going to expect the viewer to take it for granted that they're right, that those three companies control $20 trillion in assets, without really explaining how they do that. You know why Bernie doesn't explain how they control those assets? Because they don't. That's the point. The point about Bernie's bad analysis, he doesn't even understand the very structure of capitalism. He's clueless on it. When he says, so here's three Wall Street firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, combined they control, they don't own it, they control it, over $20 trillion in assets. Wrong, Bernie. They don't own those assets, he acknowledges, is why they also don't control it, Bernie. He never once connects the dots. He just makes the assumption that they still control those assets without explaining how they would do that without owning those assets. It would have been an obvious question for the interviewer to ask. Okay, well, how do they control it? Interviewer didn't ask that. He goes into something about, yeah, that's a lot of money. Yeah. So he expects anyone to listen to him to make the same assumption that Bernie is correct without asking the obvious question, well, how do they control it? Those companies he mentions, they broker the trading of assets. That doesn't mean they control it. That is as goofy as saying your local grocery store, your grocery store is a type of broker. They match buyers and sellers, right? So that's as goofy as saying your local broker or your local grocery store type of broker matching buyers and sellers controls food production. In any event, the people who control assets, those companies he mentions, are shareholders for the assets that they broker. They broker thousands of trades every minute. Hershey, Apple, McCormick, Watsco, etc. Literally thousands of companies, and the three companies Bernie mentions broker trades between those buyers and sellers. People can buy or sell anytime they wish with a mere 3 or 4 mouse clicks and do it in a matter of seconds, less than 10 seconds. Every time, I'll get back to that in a second. So brokers perform a very important function. They reduce transaction costs. Without brokers, if you wanted to buy or sell XYZ stock, Pepsi, whatever, it would be a mess. Sometimes brokers can make recommendations if an investor wants the recommendations. That doesn't mean they control the assets. You buy, for example, McCormick. I'm not trying to do stock picks here, it's just an example. You buy McCormick through a broker. It isn't the broker who has voting rights in the company just because they hold the asset McCormick for you. That would be the shareholder. Ironic that the economic system that Bernie says it's okay to be angry towards, according to the title of his book, it was something to the effect, I think the title of his book was something like, "It's okay to be angry at capitalism," something like that. Ironic that the economic system that Bernie says it's okay to be angry with is the same system that allows a little guy to be an owner of capital. There's no other economic system in the world that does that, where the little guy can take what's Pepsi, about $180 now, give or take? This is Sunday, September the 8th. I don't know exactly. I look at this stuff all the time. Pepsi's roughly about $180. There's no other economic system in which the little guy can take $180 and be an owner of capital. You buy one share. That's how you start. So Bernie Sanders erroneously thinks it's the broker who controls the assets, when in fact that would be you. He doesn't go on in that. Notice he didn't explain how those three companies control those assets. He just takes it for granted that you're supposed to believe him and just moves on. The only assets that the execs at BlackRock manage, shareholders have voting rights to elect the board, would be shares of BlackRock, which you can also buy. But what Bernie does is very conveniently make this false narrative that BlackRock must control the assets of every company's shares, that BlackRock merely brokers for people. So the result is that he comes up with this $20 trillion figure for three companies. Unbelievable. Brokers perform a very important function. They lower transaction costs. The grocery store is a type of broker. Without a grocery store, you would have to go to this place to buy meat, this place to buy fish, this place to buy milk, this place to buy eggs, this place to buy bread, this place to buy potatoes, this place to buy, another place to buy tomatoes. Now, you'd have to go to a different place for every one of those. Brokers match buyers and sellers. They reduce transaction costs. Without brokers in the markets, in the grocery store is a market that brokers in the stock market, if you wanted to buy or sell McCormick, first you would find someone who wanted to sell if you were looking to buy, or someone who was looking to buy if you wanted to sell. You'd have to agree on a price and make that transaction. Brokers lower transaction costs because you don't have to go through all that. You just go to somebody that brokers those transactions. Bernie Sanders doesn't even understand the very structure of the economic system that he's criticizing. Bernie Sanders is an idiot. And he says stuff like that as though, like what we just saw, as though he's expecting you to just auto-believe it, and then he just moves on to the next point without explaining how the broker controls those assets. They don't. That's the point. Unbelievable. If you're interested, there's I've been doing a series, Everything You Need to Know to Understand Investing, from A to Z. I'll put a link to it in lesson 1 here. This a little bit different subject. This presentation was more about economics, more so than investing, a little bit different. But if you're interested, I'm making a whole series of everything you need to know to understand investing. And I'll put a link to lesson 1. I think I've done 14 lessons now. So each lesson has a link in the description to the next lesson. So they're all very easy to find. You just go through the whole thing. Okay? But in any event, Bernie Sanders, no, does not understand economics. Kamala Harris does not understand economics. We've covered that in some previous presentations and some previous videos that I made, and other people have as well, of course. Bernie Sanders is a basket case. He clearly doesn't even understand the very structure of the economic system that he lives in and that he's criticizing. Until next time, hope life is treating you well. See you then.